Growing up is hard enough without outside influences hindering your ability to become a happy, healthy member of society. Some of these influences that may affect you can cause long term as well as short term mental and physical anguish. Today, I'd like to talk about bullying. It's one of the most prolific, detrimental things that can happen to anyone, specifically a young person. I tend to think that bullying is one youth pushing another youth, or one person verbally assaulting another, generally just in fun, but can have some real serious repercussions. In today's growing technological environment, it's not just the physical and verbal harassing, there's a new thing. It's called cyberbullying, and it's on the rise. To explore all these topics featuring bullying, we'll go over the key contributors of bullying, researching both the victim as well as the bully. These subjects include the types of bullying, who is the bully, who is the victim, why each are such, how and where it happens. Also, I'd like to briefly discuss bullying in Kansas City. According to Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, this is their definition of bullying: unwanted aggressive behaviors by another youth or group of youths who are not siblings or current dating partners, involved in an observed or perceived power of imbalance, and is repeated multiple times and is highly likely to be repeated. Bullying may inflict harm or distress on the targeted youth, including physical, psychological, social, or educational harm. Now, bullying is more than hitting and tripping. It can be stealing, hazing, um, damaging somebody else's property. Any of those things are bullying. Most people think bullying consists of in person, physical, or verbal assaults. However, like I mentioned, with the technological boom, cyberbullying has moved to the forefront and it's become quite an issue. Cyberbullying is defined by when a child or teenager is harassed, humiliated, embarrassed, threatened, or tormented using digital technology. There, I mean, with the technological boom, these things can happen anywhere. Cyberbullying is basically unescapable. You have things such as chat rooms, email, Snapchat, social media of all kinds, text messages. It's unavoidable. If somebody wants to cyberbully, they sure will. I mean, they literally have access at their fingertips. Um, just a quick note that cyberbullying may only occur between minors. In the event of an adult harassing a teenager or adult on adult cyberbullying, that's considered cyber harassment or cyber stalking. I'd like to now move on to who the victims are and who the bullies are. In fact, they do share some characteristics. Um, Victims of bullying share characteristics as well as bullies share characteristics. Victims seem to share common traits such as shyness, caution, introversion, low self confidence, unhappiness, and anxiety. Those are just a few things that they can share. And both boys and girls are just as likely to get these traits. Um, it seems as though boys fall victim more physical harassment, and girls tend to fall more into relationship bullying or verbal assaults. And kids who are often cyberbullied are often bullied in person as well. It's very unfortunate. And the people who actually do the bullying share characteristics as well. Bullies are often mean, they're confrontational, they're aggressive and spiteful, and they use manipulation to get their way, and they have short fuses and very impulsive behaviors. This behavior is not limited to strictly teens or youth on youth, but oftentimes this behavior spills over to adults, um, or parents, teachers. People tend to think the bully is a male. It's not the case. Um, Females bullying is just as common. And cyberbullying, when it comes to cyberbullying, perpetrators often derive from feelings of anger or guilt, revenge or frustration. Those are both boys and girls being the bullies. In many cases, cyberbullies were once victims of bullying and weren't guided in the proper direction and ended up being bullies themselves. Quick stat, according to one study, youth bullying, 8.8% of 6th to 10th graders admitted to bullying someone at least once a week or more, while 8.4 have experienced bullying once a week or more. It's unacceptable. So we've talked about who the bullies are, some of the characteristics they share. I'd like to discuss where and why the bullying takes place now. So bullying can obviously take place anywhere: schools, shopping malls, home, on the playground, anywhere, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When with cyberbullying on the rise, it's basically impossible, as mentioned, to escape that. Many kids sit behind their keyboards and are keyboard warriors, as they're called, and they type whatever they want. They say whatever they want without fear of repercussion. That's one of the reasons that they do that. They don't think they'll ever be face to face with these people, or if they do, they'll definitely sing another tune while they're face to face. But once they get behind that keyboard, it's a different story. It can start off with simple name calling and can quickly escalate to spreading rumors or telling lies, oftentimes making people embarrassed and saying silly claims about them, ruining their lives to a certain extent. Richard Donegan from Elon University states, and I quote, "Unlike traditional bullying, cyberbullying allows the offender to mask his or her identity behind a computer. This anonymity, makes it easier for the offender to strike blows against a victim without having to see the victim's physical response. So it makes it easier. The distancing effect that technological devices have on today's youth often lead them to say and do crueler things compared to what is typical face-to-face bullying. So, cyberbullies tend to think that their actions are funny and harmless, and oftentimes what they're doing is no big deal, but in fact, it is a big deal. It's a very big deal. Um, Kids often cyberbully to replace social skills that they failed to develop in school. I know when I'm online and I see people saying negative things on social media, per se, that's often followed with poor grammar, bad punctuation. You can tell that they weren't quite all there in school, and in turn, they take it out on other people. So now that some of the fundamentals are covered, I'd like to go on to the repercussions of bullying and cyberbullying. It has a negative if bullying has a negative effect on everybody involved. There's no winners, that's for sure. This affects the victim as well as the perpetrator. Um, there's a quote by CNN I'd like to state: because children tend to spend more time with their peers, it stands to reason that if they have a negative effect, a relationship with another peer, the effects could be severe and long lasting. That only makes sense as peers tend to spend more time with other peers than they do with probably their parents, as far as because they're in school and they have friends. So sadly, being bullied by your youth can actually cause long-term suffering, worse than those children and teens that are um, abused by adults. So being bullied by a youth by one of your peers is worse than being abused by an adult. It's pretty mind-boggling. Um, Oftentimes, youths can resolve their differences in a civil manner, but it's not just the one time and they have a problem and they get over it. It's the bullying is what happens when it's repeated over and over again. Um, what happens when this behavior happens? Symptoms such as depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, self harm, social deficiencies all plague the bullying victims, um, from youth all the way through adulthood. It's said that physical face-to-face bullying throughout the teen years may even double the risk of suicidal behaviors and thoughts as an adult, and definitely severely affect their depression down the line. So children have the ability to internalize this harm, which causes stress-related issues like anxiety and depression. Bullied children and teens internalize this, and they're reluctant to share these what's happening with a teacher and a parent or another adult. They often keep to themselves because of fear or shame, and up to 50% of children say they would never or rarely tell an adult if they were being bullied. I don't understand that. It's terrible. If somebody's being bullied, they need to speak out, please. Um, Only 35%, 35 and 60% would actually tell somebody. When a youth can no longer internalize the harm, they unfortunately start projecting these feelings of guilt and shame, and they turn into hatred, and they oftentimes turn into bullies themselves. So that's the physical bullying. Cyberbullying can have just as much of an effect, of course, than traditional face to face bullying. Um, the same thing with cyberbullying. It can lead to depression, self harm, and even suicide or suicidal thoughts or behaviors. Kids who are cyberbullied often face the same consequences of those who are traditionally bullied. These symptoms include use of alcohol, use of drugs, skipping school, poor grades, lower self esteem, and overall general health problems. Um, just like face to face bullying, youths who cyberbullied often internalize these feelings and can often turn into from a victim to a bully themselves. So, what happens later down the line? What happens in adulthood if you're victims of bullying or the bully? Well, well into your adult years, it has a great effect, of course. Um, According to Anne Steele, part of my research, she claims that depression and anxiety tend to characterize their emotional outlook well beyond the bullying years in their youth years, extending into their adult lives where they become chronic, sometimes lifelong problems. Eating, sleeping, working, exercising, engaging in regular adult activities such as romantic relationships or interesting hobbies, all are extremely hard for people who are victims of bullying and cyberbullying. Um, Many sources claim that, or many sources conclude that the sticks and stones theory about words can't hurt me is actually completely wrong, and in fact, verbal harassment is much worse than physical bullying in many cases. Um, when people are constantly told that they're too tall, too skinny, too fat, whatever, stupid, their self image actually can be permanently damaged, and it affects them well into their adult years. Um, when situations arise at work or friendships come into struggles, this can oftentimes be very difficult for bullies to overcome as they find themselves struggling with the perseverance that it takes to actually get through certain situations. Um, I mean, that can happen in their work life as well. So relationships and work are a real struggle. Um, so bullying is a bad thing for everybody. It affects everybody involved, as I've mentioned, not just the victims, but the bullies themselves. Bullies oftentimes grow up in adulthood to be unhappy adults. Um, the way they relate to the world doesn't translate. They can't be angry all the time. They can't bully people all the time as adults because people won't take it. Um, So they oftentimes have it trouble. The bullies oftentimes have trouble, just like the victims, retaining romantic relationships or strong work ethic, keeping their jobs, long-term careers. It's all struggle for the bully as well in general. Um, what's really bad is the bully slash victim. The bully victim, who's somebody who's a bully as well as the victim, they have it doubly as hard. Um, these types of situations often turn into childhood psychiatric disorders, panic disorders, and generalized anxiety. So if you're a fall victim and you internalize that stuff, you become the bully. You're doubly in bad shape. Um, of course, not everybody gets bullied. I mean, excuse me, everybody gets bullied everywhere in the world. And because I'm here in Kansas City at the time, I briefly spoke with a man named Anthony Butler who runs his own program in Kansas City, shedding a little light on bullying in Kansas City. He's the founder of the VIP Violence Prevention Program here in Kansas City. Mr. Anthony Butler claims that bullying, cyberbullying, are very big problems here in Kansas City, primarily because of the ignorance and underreported incidents from the bullying victim. Um, Parents, students, educators, um, they don't know who is really truly being bullied and really what bullying is and the effects that it can have. I strongly suggest you go to the VIP website if you want some more information, or get a hold of Mr. Butler himself. He's a phenomenal guy. I'm happy to talk to you. His organization confronts the underlying reasons for violence in unique ways is his slogan, and he wants to address the grassroots for this violence. They do that through speeches, one-on-one talks, seminars. Please talk to Mr. Anthony Butler at the VIP, um, his program here in Kansas City. It's anti-bullying and anti-violence. Um, the most common impacts he claims are individuals who were violent changing their course to help others. That's what his main goal is, to help people that were once violent, and he loves to see them now help other people become less violent. So throughout this speech, I've talked a lot about bullying, of course, and the different ways bullying has affected people. A few of the definitions about bullying. I'd like to give a special thanks to Mr. Anthony Butler from here in Kansas City. Great guy. I appreciate his time. Um, so the bullying effects are we've talked about who's the victim, who's the bully, who, what, when, where, why, how bullying affects all of everybody involved, and the bullying effects are very real, and the consequences are very real. So don't be a bystander when you see bullying. Let's all come together and make a stop. If bullying didn't exist in this world, it would be a much better place. I'd like to thank you all for watching my speech, and I appreciate it. Have a great day. Thank you.